Welcome, attendees. We'll go ahead and get started in just a few minutes, but while we're waiting for folks to join, we like to ask our panelists some get to knowing them questions so that you're able to get to know them a little bit better. So today's question is, what did you want to be when you grew up? Let's go ahead and start with Jonathan.
Hi everyone. So I'm a big space nerd. And I always loved space, and I actually want to be maybe corny, but an astronaut. But who knows, might happen. Elon Musk is building rockets, so you might buy a ticket eventually for some kind of affordable price. So maybe I can still be one officially, if you pass the 100-mile mark. So astronaut is my answer.
Totally, I love that. You might be able to be one without it being a career, which is crazy. Scott, how about you?
Yeah, so, and Jonathan, with Demostack's trajectory right now, I think we would be able to make that happen. Continue this growth, you'll be up in space in no time. Hi everyone, thanks for joining. When I was younger, I think you're kind of almost like told, or your perception is changed by like what adults tell you. And adults used to always tell me that I would make a good lawyer. And I think that was because I was maybe argumentative as a kid, or I loved to look at the other side. I would play devil's advocate all the time, just for the sake of playing devil's advocate, not necessarily that I shared the viewpoint. I just like to look at both sides. So I thought I was going to be a lawyer up until I was about 17, and then looked at the crazy amount of schooling that had to happen, and I was pulled more in kind of like the entrepreneurial sales route. But yeah, that was what I thought.
No, totally. I think that devil's advocate persona, even if you don't agree with the side you're arguing, is so important for the entrepreneurial journey as well, and just the business journey. So that's really interesting. Last but certainly not least, Jaco.
Yeah, hi all. Thanks for having me. I think actually astronaut was my number 2 choice, Jonathan, so we can join the same rocket ship. But when my number 1 was Indiana Jones. I grew up in Scandinavia. It's pretty cold and dark up there, so like I was going to travel to warmer countries and seeing those movies and seeing the guy travel around and explore some cool stuff. I remember drawing these little like treasure maps and give them to my parents as like little wish, like, hey, when do we go to Egypt? When do we go to, I don't know, Iran? And that would drive me crazy. So I guess I didn't become Indiana Jones, but I got to travel the world, so I'm halfway there.
Totally, I love that. That's awesome. I don't know if I've ever heard that before, the Indiana Jones, but that's a good one. I like that. So folks are still joining, but let's go ahead and get started. You're at Driving and Striving, going the distance with better product demos. Before we get started, we have a little bit of housekeeping and just agenda items to get through. So first up is today's event is hosted by Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related supporting disciplines. Our mission is to create an environment for our 20,000 and growing members to answer questions they'd otherwise struggle to solve on their own, and help them see around the corners they may not know about. We do that through great online sessions like what you're about to experience today, through our robust online forum, and in the near future, hopefully again, one day, in-person events. Definitely miss those. So with that, thanks for joining. And as you registered for this event, you'll get added to the community. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jonathan. And Jonathan's going to say a little bit about Demostack, our sponsor for today.
Thank you. So Demostack, we help companies win deals by having great demos. We have a full software suite that helps you create the best demos by recording your product, creating a duplicate, and then being able to showcase it in any way, shape, or form. It helps you create something that's personalized for every deal, that makes sense for every discussion you have, and just takes a demo instead of being something that's someone worked on a while ago, and it's this kind of thing you're trying to kind of get going. It's actually a tool in your arsenal to help tailor every product conversation you have and show a personalized demo to each and every prospect. and thereby, as I mentioned, just close more deals and increase revenues and make customers and get more customers. And that's what we do.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. So next up, I'm super, super excited about this. Earlier this week, we announced our next virtual summit. Modern Sales Pros is calling it the Mega SCO. It's going to be 9 virtual events over 3 days, plus an in-person component or 2. After 2 years of virtual, I think we're all ready to get back to that one-on-one real life networking. So you should think of this as the SCO you're actually excited to attend, or SKO if you don't call it a SCO. We'll drop the link in the chat, but definitely head over there and learn more, get registered, and excited to see everyone virtually and potentially in person. We've started to collect some speakers on this, and it's an awesome lineup with awesome logos. So we'll drop that soon, but go ahead and get registered. So with that, we're really excited to dive into today's content. I'm going to run through some housekeeping things just before we get started with introductions. First off, this event is being recorded. You'll be able to access this recording and the key takeaways on the previous events page of the Modern Sales Pros website. Second, this format of event is only as engaging as the audience, so use this time to leverage our speakers. The Q&A panel is live. Ask your questions and we'll get them incorporated into the conversation. So with that, let's meet our panelists today. Today, we're talking about going the distance with better product demos, and we have some great experts on this topic here today. Jaco, Scott, and Jonathan, in that order. Before we get started, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and tell them a little bit about why you're qualified to speak to this topic. Jaco, you're up first.
Awesome. Yeah, great to meet you all again. My name is Jaco. I am the VP of Sales and Customer Success at Airbase. Airbase is the leading spend management platform, so we're very much working in the very hot fintech space. And both at Airbase and before, I ran sales and customer success teams, and I think the demo is always a very hot topic. There's so many different practices out there, and I think there's many ways to do demos wrong. So that's something, I feel very passionate about this topic, and I feel like I have some points of view from my experience working both with smaller and bigger companies across different industries. So excited to be here.
Scott, you're up next.
So my name is Scott Barker. I'm the Director of Strategic Engagement at Outreach. Outreach is the #1 sales engagement platform. I also am a co-founder and venture partner at GTM Fund. It's a venture firm that focuses on early stage B2B software companies. Demostack is one of our portfolio companies that we love and love to support. We're very bullish on the category they're creating. And yeah, I mean, I've been around sales and MarTech kind of my whole career, and given a lot of demos. I've been on the receiving end of, purchasing a lot of different pieces of software. So I've seen a lot of demos on the buy side. And then, recently with this fund, a lot of founder pitches are showing demos and things. So I see a lot of those every day as well. So excited to share some things I've picked up over the years. And I think it's a great topic. Excited to dive in.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. And then last but certainly not least, Jonathan.
Yeah, so I'm CEO and co-founder of Demostack, as I mentioned, demo experience platform. I've been an entrepreneur my entire career, pretty much. I think while at school, I did a short stint as an investment banker. I was like, nope, I want to be an entrepreneur and continue that trend. So I've been starting software companies pretty much my entire career. Before starting Demostack, I was actually at TripActions, building TripActions Liquid, which was as well as expense management kind of product. And kind of encountered the demo issue head on and just became obsessed with it. The problem that I thought was small and then grew bigger and eventually took me in and absorbed me and made me quit my job, and which was like a startup within a startup essentially. So it wasn't really a job. But really go after this and do, create a company around this. So that's how I got here.
Totally. Thanks, Jonathan. And then super quickly, this isn't about me, but I'm Hannah White. I'm on the Modern Sales Pros team. I'm just going to be moderating today's conversation and making all of our panelists look like the brilliant humans they are. So with that, where am I? All right. So as mentioned before, today's conversation is centered around driving and striving, going the distance with better product demos. The discussion points we'll be diving into as related to the high level topic are communicating value sooner, tailoring the product story, and enabling more team members to show more product. With that, let's head into our first talking point, communicating value sooner. So Jaco, I know you prepped some awesome thoughts on this and you noted some great resources related to those thoughts. Can you talk to that a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. So I think before even getting to the value, I mean, any conversation with a customer is exactly that. It's a conversation. I think a good AE or a good salesperson makes the other person feel comfortable first. And I think what goes into that is, first of all, knowing your audience. Like for instance, if I look at my team at Airbase, we work a lot with our investors, our VCs, and we get a lot of intros through them to customers. It's a very different situation to do a demo with a partner versus a customer. The partner doesn't care about the nitty-gritty features or workflows, they care about the big story, versus a customer, say a CFO or an accountant, has a very different need basis, what they need to know. So just knowing that from the get-go, who you're talking to. I know this is very much an obvious thing to state, but I see that go wrong quite often. So I think it's worth calling out. That's one. And then I think across the whole company, something I love that our founder does is he makes sure that the whole company knows the company elevator pitch. For us, it's, from founding to IPO, Airbase can help you with your spend management. Every single person in the company has to know that, so that the story is the value of our company is the same on the receiving end, no matter who the customer talks to. If it's the support person or the AE or the CSM or somebody else, they have to get the same kind of value story from those different perspectives. I think that's the second. And then third, this might be more of a, let's say, unconventional point, but I think, there's a metaphor that one of our investors used that a good seller is like a fennec fox. I didn't know what this animal is, so I had to look it up. It's a fox with huge ears and a very small mouth. So you have to be able to, listen, understand what the other side is saying, while still staying very present in the moment and kind of like understand how you communicate. So I talk a lot about, say, for instance, meditation to my team. How can you stay in a mindful space when you're presenting, when you're talking to people, so that you don't end up like rambling for 10 minutes without checking in with the other party? So those are my couple of, high level points before even getting to the value, like how do you prep the conversation and how do you stay true to yourself while having a conversation?
Definitely. Thanks, Jaco. And I know there were a couple of books you recommended on this point. Do you want to dive into those specific recommendations?
Oh yeah, sure. There's a book called Crucial Conversations. It's not a sales book. It's a book about how to have a conversation. You can use this with your partner, with your boss, with your children, with customers. It's just a really good book about, how to have a conversation and sometimes how to have a tough conversation. So that's one. And then my favorite kind of more on the self-help side, a book called Awareness by Anthony DeMello. It's all about like how to kind of like stay present, how to stay in this moment, how to work your breathing, things like that. I think that will just, lead to more meaningful conversations overall.
Definitely. Something we've been hearing a lot in the community and in a couple different situations is that more business people need to read nonviolent communication, which is traditionally just a communication book, but it does really well for the business side of things. And then also, Jaco, loved your point about the whole company knowing the company elevator pitch. I think everyone is so focused on sales teams learning it that there's a lot of people throughout the sales cycle that are interacting with customers that don't necessarily know that. So that's a really good point, and it's not practiced enough in a lot of orgs. So awesome point there. Scott, you want to dive into your thoughts on this talking point?
For sure. And strong supporter of everything Jaco said there. I'll have to check out the awareness book. I think a few points on communicating value sooner for the sales professionals that are joining us is we kind of got hammered into our heads over the last 5 years. Discovery, and the traditional lens of discovery was ask a bunch of questions, ask as many questions as you can. And, then that's going to unlock this information that's going to allow you to like formulate, this perfect demo later and all this. And discovery is super important. It is arguably the most important part of the sales process, but we're seeing this shift with buyers that, particularly if you're selling to executives, they don't have time for all of your questions. They're not here to be on a call with you. 30 minutes is so valuable. And if you're just peppering them with questions, like, why am I wasting my time here? So you can still do discovery, but come with a point of view instead. So I feel like the top 1% of sellers have always known this and always do this. They'll do an intense amount of research because everything is online now. Most of the answers to your questions you can find out yourself within 45 minutes of picking around, going through everything. And then when you have this CRO, CMO, whoever you sell into, don't waste it asking questions. Share your point of view and say, hey, based on what I could see online, we're assuming you're struggling here. Here's how I think we can fix it. And it doesn't even have to be right. That's the beauty of it, is they will naturally correct you. And that's how you can tease out these really important pieces of information that you need from them. So it's not just about peppering with questions, it's having a point of view and having this collaborative discussion to uncover more things in their business. And the scary part about having a point of view is it's not a checklist of questions that you can just run through. That's much easier. To have a point of view, you have to be an expert. And this requires you to go very deep into your craft, deep into your industry, which isn't the easy way of doing things. And I would urge everyone that's on this call that does demos, like, that's what you need to aspire to. And when I was a seller, I would run this thought experiment all the time, which was, could I, as an individual, be so valuable in this next 45 minutes because I know so much about my industry and the problems that I solve, that they would pay for me, and the product or the service I'm selling is just a byproduct that they also get, and that's what you have to aspire to. And that requires really deep knowledge of the problems that you're solving beyond just your product or service.
That's really interesting. I think we hear about that a lot. It's kind of like the first 5 minutes of a call. You have to convince someone that you're worth talking to for the full time. And showing that you're an expert in your craft is definitely a way to make that conversation easier. Jonathan, any thoughts to add on communicating value sooner?
Well, absolutely echoing what everything Scott just said. It's we ran a poll actually yesterday, and most people still focus on heavy discovery, which is again important. Nobody says discovery is not important. You should understand what you're talking about, but yes, you can find out a lot. And I think conversation is always more human than questions, right? I in my past, I was in the Israeli army mandatory service. I was a special investigator, criminal investigator, and so questioning is never fun. You don't want to be, there's questioning and there's a conversation, and if you get too much in discovery, it kind of loses that personal piece, especially since the executive. I know I'm very short. I'm just like, I don't have the time, and my interest goes down really fast. And I think that's also part of like tooling. Like, when you had old tooling, you needed to kind of research, talk, get all the data, and you needed to, then whip out the demo, and it's this incredible thing. Maybe it took you hours to prep, and you have this beast of a product, and you need to kind of showcase it in a certain way. But I think in more modern times, you can have kind of almost like canned demos that can be customized a little bit and use that as backdrop for your conversations. That gives someone a taste of the product. And new generations, product says a lot. They've used good products from forever. So you want to give that taste early, because a product is the best way to kind of really understand what your company is about. of course, you might not want to whip up a whole demo and sit there for an hour. They're not ready for this. You don't know enough. But if you have these kind of small tailored demos that give them a taste, different people, you can show that earlier and actually engage in a conversation. And to Scott's point, they might correct you and say, let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. That's not interesting. This is interesting. And kind of use that as a more natural progression where you also have a tit for tat. You give something out and not just pepper questions.
Definitely. A couple questions have come in. So Jonathan, I'd love for your perspective here. So Carl says people love to buy, but they hate being sold to. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I love that fox analogy Jacko just gave. It's, you know, it's I think selling, you know, if you ask the average person, what does a salesperson look like? They would imagine a slick, you know, person with a James Bond suitcase and hair full of gel, you know, and that's actually probably that's actually worse, maybe salesperson. Not saying that if you have gel, you're not good, but it's not that slickness is a part of us having a human conversation early and being a real advocate, of course, for your product, understanding it, but also understanding your customer's pain. You know, and I encourage our people to say, if there's not a good fit, then be very honest about it. Say, hey, we can't serve you, we can't help you. Maybe this product can. And so I think that selling, if you think about it as selling rather than like a commercial discussion and being very honest, don't lose your humanity just chasing after the dollar bill. It changes the conversation. And people remember you by that. You know, it's life is short. Be honest, be human, and if you put your humanity in it, you'll do okay. You'll do okay.
Totally. Carl actually submitted 3 questions, so I'm going to ask one for each of you guys. Yako, service before profit is a key value in selling. Any thoughts on that?
That's a great quote. Service before profit. Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to kind of like what Scott was saying before about, you know, the POV, the point of view. I think that combined with the good conversation leads to a lot of good luck in demos. Actually, one of my favorite quotes is called luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I think it's by a guy called Seneca. He was a philosopher in ancient Greece. And I think that's kind of like what this question is going after. Like, you have to be able to create a conversation, get a reaction from the customer. And it doesn't even always have to be, by the way, a positive reaction. Reactions are energy. You as a salesperson will receive it and then work with it. That is worth gold compared to somebody who was just like stonewall you and say nothing. Like, that's the worst nightmare for a salesperson. And I think to get to the reaction, you need to be off service first and provide some value for the customer. Even if it's a pointed question or a challenging question, they will have to react to. So yeah, I think those are my main thoughts around being off service before profit.
Definitely. I think this relates a little bit to what Scott was saying, but there's, I can't think of what it's called, but like the customer service or bad experience conundrum where you can actually create a better reputation if someone's unhappy, because you have the chance to like rebuild your image with them. So that's a really interesting point. And then last but not least, Scott. So, I mean, this relates a little bit to the fox analogy Yako said, but Carl says we need to listen more and talk less to customers. What are your thoughts there? Oh, I think you're muted. Had to happen once.
There we go, of course. We need to listen more and talk less to customers. Yes, overall, I agree with that sentiment. You don't want to be talking the whole time. My only like caveat there, and it goes back to a little bit of what I was talking about, is we have no problem listening to experts, or at least I don't, and most people, right? Like if I'm going, let's use Web3 and NFTs, for example. A lot of people don't know what's going on, but they want to. So if I could find someone who could articulate that landscape for me, I don't care if they're talking 70% of the time, because it's something I want to understand and they're an expert and they have a point of view and they are helping and they're guiding me. So it's not a cut, and it's not like a cut and dry rule that like, okay, I can't talk. If you have a point of view and you have information that they don't have that they want, it is okay to share that. Just make sure you're checking in and with a thoughtful, not just like, does that make sense, but a thoughtful, like, am I addressing what you were trying to get at? And like doing those check-ins are super important. But you know, I'll listen all day long to someone who is an expert in a field that I'm curious about.
Definitely. I think that's an awesome point and a good caveat to suggest. So moving on to our second talking point for today, it's about tailoring the product story. Jaco, you had some awesome points on this in the prep doc, and again, awesome suggestion on the book related to your talking point. So let's learn some more about that.
Yeah, so I think I'll just kind of give some context first. Like our product, we have a platform. It has 3 different pillars in it. So we're selling a very complex product by many standards. And I think that's where my comment is coming from. Like, I think if you're selling something quite technically complex, it gives the risk of going down the wrong rabbit hole is pretty high, right? So I think with that, getting to simplicity is so hard. How do you convey, how do you demo and show as little as possible with as big impact as possible? That is really hard. And I like what Jonathan said before about, you know, it shouldn't be only black and white discovery first, a lot of questions, and then going to like this massively in-depth demo. To me, it's all about like, how do you weave in your value props from the first call throughout the whole sales cycle? Like, in a way, the demoing doesn't start and stop in that one demo call. It starts earlier on verbally by describing what you can do. Then you move more into like a visual blend of showing what you do, but it continues throughout the POC, whatever pilot you're running. I think demoing is present throughout the whole life cycle of a deal. And the book that I recommended for this segment was The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Again, I'm not, you know, proposing any like violence or war here, but the book in itself talks about understanding the landscape of the situation you are in. And I think that is crucial. No matter what your role you're in, you're dealing with a customer, understand the landscape, understand the customer, what is their situation, is this a priority or not, and then you will adjust based on that. You can't just go with a canned approach to every single situation. That doesn't really fly. And just like some concrete tips, we don't use Demostack yet, at least. Maybe we will one day, but the MVP version of Demostack that I've seen my teams use is having, for instance, little GIFs as part of your presentation that you can show and pull up to the customer and just kind of like show snippets of, getting a look and feel of the product. That in itself will kind of like weave into understanding what's important for the customer. So yeah.
Definitely. I think some good tooling recommendations there are things like Cloud App and like Vidyard for those quick little Giphy type situations, incorporating those into your workflow. I'm sure there's other examples. Also, Jaco, love the book recommendations with each of your talking points. So Scott, Jonathan, if you guys have anything to dive into, like deeper learnings on your talking points, feel free to reference those. We'll share them with attendees after. Scott, awesome points and thoughts on this as well. Do you want to dive into your perspective a little bit more?
Yeah, storytelling. I don't think we can understate the importance of storytelling. You know, if you've read the popular book, you know, Sapiens, many people have, at least in the tech industry, you know, that is really the defining feature of human beings, is the ability to create stories and believe in fictions that haven't happened yet. And that's really what you're doing as a sales professional, right? You're creating this alternate reality of their future state that they could get to if they use your product and service. And you need to learn like the fabric of what makes a good story. Just like all the books you read, there needs to be a middle, there needs to be a beginning, there needs to be an end, there needs to be a story arc, there needs to be some change that happens. And one of my favorite frameworks for this, it's an old blog post that Andy Raskins did, I think like 4 or 5 years ago, but it still rings true. And it's a great way to present a story. and it breaks down into 5 parts. Number 1 is name a big relevant change in the world. Okay, so buyers are more inundated with sellers than ever before. Attention spans are shortening, like a big change that's happening. And then you'll have to show that there'll be winners and losers. So in the Demostack, it's like, people doing the old demos, you're going to lose people. Executives don't have time. I don't want to see your demo. I don't have time. So it's tailoring these hyper specific moments to these people and unlocking that. And the winners will be ones who enable their entire organization to do these hyper tailored demos. And then you kind of tease the promised land of like, we've helped other companies get there. And here's what it looks like in that promised land. And only then that's when you can like start to overlay your like features and your benefits as these magic gifts that will get people to the promised land. And then the last piece is just like social proof. So it's presenting evidence that you can make that story come true, that you're the one who can take them to that promised land. So that's a really good framework. You can search Andy Raskin, the greatest sales deck ever made, to learn more about that one. I think it really rings true. And then if you haven't read Sapiens, it's one of my, it sounds like trite to say, but it's one of my favorite books. I've read it like 3 times.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm pulling up the links for that blog post. It also looks like the making of a great strategic narrative is probably also related to that, by Andy Raskin. So I'll paste both those in the chat. Jonathan, your perspective on this one.
Yeah, I wanna really great thoughts. You can think about human mind as like a market, and the way the currency is storytelling. So the way an idea forms in one mind and then transfers to another mind, for humans, that's storytelling. That's how it works. And sales is no different. The sales is just a conversation that has commercials attached to it, right? So it's not like so that's the difference. So it also starts and ends with a story, and that's how humans evaluate anything and kind of can attach. And that's like the highest level that someone can be interested in and start wanting to sweat details. So you can't go from details into story. You have to start with story and go to details. And if story isn't important, then you want to tell a story that's specific, because human minds, because stories is everything that they're bombarded with, are aimed to filter 99.9% of everything that's going on, right? If you don't, then you walk in the street and you just like die from a sensory overload from all the signs blasting stuff at you. So every one of us is an expert in indifference. We have to be. And indifference is only pierced through a very pointed, interesting, and compelling story. And in a commercial way, so usually you go on a call if you got like an email or saw an ad or something that piqued your interest. So you kind of pierce the veil a little bit, but you're not in by any means. So the story has to be compelling. And again, if you make it their own and put them in the shoes and kind of make them understand, put them in the center of the story, that's huge. And I would argue that a product, showing product in a sense, is probably one of the best ways to do that. It's almost like putting VR glasses on. You can feel what the company is about by seeing the product. So that it makes the story very much real, because saying stuff is one thing, showing is even stronger, because the visual, because how humans respond to visual clues. So you want to have a specific demo and tailor it. You don't want to show the same demo to a VP finance and VP marketing. It doesn't make any sense. They have different questions, different concerns. And if you know your business, you probably know what, roughly at least, even starting out, what the differences will be. So have at least different vignettes for the couple buyers, the couple of verticals you have that you can go to.
Definitely. I want to incorporate a few RSVP and live attendee questions here. So there's a question on how to balance pitching and slides versus walking through software. A couple caveats I wanted to add to this, where I've recently heard that you shouldn't ever have slides on your first call with a customer. And then second, when in the process, like what meeting number, what specific goal in the or in the sales process should you be incorporating demos? So Jonathan, what's your perspective there? It's a lot of questions, so good
You
luck
want to break
taking
it
that on.
down? Yeah.
We can break it down a little bit. So how to balance pitching and slides versus walking through software.
Right. I think the tooling. I mean, there's all these adages of sales and people, that come into mind, and I've seen the best salespeople break everything in a sense. I've in a few times in my career, I've sat through amazing salespeople, and I started actually in a sales call center in my early career, and we were taught one way, and then I sat next to someone who was the best. And I was like, okay, great. I'm going to see how he handles the exact script and all that. And I saw him break it completely and just crush it, right? And then I was like, that perplexed me. So I'd say like nothing is set in stone. But in terms of pitching versus product, I think again you have to frame it in the sense of a conversation. Giving a pitch, showing a couple of slides before does help frame. If I throw you into a product and you don't know what you're going to get and you're kind of into it really quickly, that is also that can get confusing. Starting with a few slides, setting the scene, telling the story in a pitch deck on top of that, and then going to product, that's much better. But again, sometimes you can have a prospect that's like, I've seen like 3 tools, I know what I want, here's what, and then like it's like then spending the time opening the deck up and talking about that. Even though that's supposed to be the process, might be a huge waste of time. So maybe you say, okay, if you have to show like, that's in one slide and quickly go into the demo. So you want to give them what they want, understand and meet them where they are. And sometimes they want to have that full, what I call VR experience, kind of going into the product and feeling what it would mean to use it. But you don't want to throw them too fast. You want to set it up if you can. But again, depends on the prospect. I wouldn't go by adages and kind of rules of thumb. Keep it in the back of your mind, of course, but know you can break everything if you start getting that sense and think about human conversation first as you're kind of guiding North Star.
Definitely. Jaco, any perspective to add to that? I think you're muted. Had to happen twice.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts on that. I mean, I think you had a couple of different questions. One was the pitching versus showing, and then the other one was like how many meetings to get to a certain point. I just want to first correct, there's a huge misconception in many sales teams whereby the Salesforce stage defines how many calls you need to have. To me, that is outright wrong. Your discovery, connecting with the customer might take 5 minutes, might take 4 calls. There's no like 1 call, 1 stage connection. At least that's what I believe. And I think as a salesperson, you need to earn the right to talk, earn the right to kind of share your opinion. And something that we've done that I think is a pretty cool tip. We've hired accountants to customer-facing roles so that our team speaks the customer's language. We sell to CFOs and accountants. So like having similar people with similar backgrounds helps to earn that right to talk. And going back to the pitch versus show comment and the storytelling, by the way, our first call deck is built based on the Andrew model. So great plug there, Scott. I love it. I think it literally is the best sales deck out there. So if somebody in the call hasn't seen that before, do some Googling and look it up. I think it's really good. Where was I? Yeah, going back to the pitching and showing. So I think storytelling is all about emitting feelings and emotions. If you've scripted out a story and just read it through, that's not gonna fly. You have to be able to kind of feel what the customer is feeling, and then maybe you'll get a reaction by stating something like in the Andrew model. What are the strong statements in the beginning of your conversation with the customer that helps you get a reaction? Like for instance, for us, it might be, we believe that in the next 3 to 5 years, majority of finance teams will move to a consolidated spend management platform. What do you think? And let the customer react. And then from there, you kind of like bit by bit, again, earn the right to show more once you know where you have the customer. So I feel like I was rambling a bit, so I'll stop there.
No. I love it. I think that's all really important perspective. And the point about the act of a sales process and it directly correlating to what stage you are in Salesforce or whatever. I think that's a really important note that sales teams, they try to define the process and it's step by step, but you would need to adapt to the customer. So really good point there. And Scott, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, these questions kind of come up a lot of these questions of, hey, should I use a deck? Should I use video in my process? Should I use LinkedIn messages? And a lot of people are confused. These are just mediums of communication. They are not a strategy in and of itself, you know, and people confuse a medium with a strategy versus if you need a deck, like all the deck is doing is conveying your story in a better way. Maybe it gives me some visuals. Maybe you're talking about a complex idea that I will have trouble following just your spoken word. If you have a simple product, you don't need a deck. You don't need a deck. You know, you can just dive right into it. But if you're finding that you're losing people, or you always get a certain question from your prospects, and they always like, ooh, they can't grasp that thing, then maybe it's helpful to introduce a little bit of a deck, maybe 3-4 slides to start, so you can kind of get ahead of the way people are processing. But you know, even demos, slide, all these things are mediums to help you convey the story that you're trying to tell. They have nothing to do with the story. So if you can like, it's the old adage, like if I had more time, I'd write a shorter letter or whatever. It's kind of the same thinking of, you know, you want to convey your problem and the solution you have to the problem as simply as possible. And if you can do that just through words, and that's the simplest way for people to understand, then do that. If you need the aids of, you know, demos, and you need the aids of slide decks because it's a little more complex, then you use them. But I don't feel like you have to use a slide deck in lots of scenarios.
Definitely. No, I think that the simplification of that is, you articulated that really well. So thanks for that perspective, Scott. Our last talking point today is enabling more team members to show product. There was a lot of awesome points brainstormed on this one. Jaakko, let's start with you. What is your perspective here?
Yeah, this is kind of what I mentioned before about the getting the whole team, the whole company to speak the same language, using the same story. That to me is the scalable way of sharing similar value story to the customers. So I think that's one. Then obviously this might take us more to the kind of technical solutions like Demostack. I think what the guys have built is amazing. It allows you to kind of fast customize the demo you're showing to the customer. So to me, this is kind of like two angles. Is your company unified behind the story? And then do you have the best tools in place to tell that story as effectively as possible, and without taking, you know, hours and hours of tailoring time from the reps to create that story? Obviously, everybody knows with the largest customers, you always do more customization, but I think with the right tech, that customization can be brought to the smaller deals, the mid-sized deals as well. So I think that's where, you know, shameless plug for Demostack. I think what the guys have built is really cool. This is not a paid advertisement, by the way. I just leave that.
Thank you for that disclaimer. And I think you had a book to recommend on this one too.
Yeah, there's a book called The Power of Moments. It's written by Heath brothers. This was actually a book that our director of customer success recommended. It's all about like how to provide positive feelings and emotions to a customer across different interactions. Really good book, goes back to the storytelling, goes back to emitting feelings and emotions. Highly recommend checking out.
Awesome. Scott, what's your perspective on this one?
This is super interesting, and I feel like this is the way the world is moving. So I spend a lot of my time at Outreach unlocking nascent relationships that people have that are outside of just our sales team. things like our VCs, our board, our engineers, our finance executives, like everyone has relationships, particularly as you get to like a certain size. And sometimes your best sellers are the people in your organization that match the persona you sell into, right? So if you sell into finance, you know who's going to be a better seller than your sellers is your finance team. They're going to have more peers. They're going to speak the language. They are going to understand, and they have automatic trust from your persona. Same thing if you sell to HR teams. Your HR team will be the best sellers that you ever have. And that's what we think, this big change that's happening. And maybe those people aren't equipped to have the same kind of commercial level discussions, but if you can arm them with that unified story, you know, with a tool like Demostack to have these quick tailored things, it's extremely powerful. And I feel like a lot of organizations up till now are using 25% of the nodes in their network, and that's only in their sales team. You know, Demostack and tools like it allow you to use all the nodes in that network and reach far more people and give them the tools they need to go out and tell a powerful story.
Definitely. Has anyone on this team mastered the like ride along from an expert within your org, even if they're not a seller? Jocko, you mentioned that, but did you say you hire accountants to be your sellers, or you like hire partners to sell with them? Oh, I think you're muted.
Keep muting myself, sorry for that. Yeah, we have, for instance, if I look at my CSM team, we have former accountants in there so that they speak the customer's language. Again, we sell to CFOs and finance teams. Some of our biggest internal champions are our finance team. Like Scott mentioned, our CFO on a regular basis jumps to at least 5 customer calls to share his point of view on our own tool, because he's the buyer on the other side. Similarly, our accountants work with our product team to tell their story, again, from the buyer's perspective. So that's definitely something we're pretty big on. The selling doesn't only happen from the sales team's perspective. And then there's the internal selling, like, do you have your target customer internally talking with your product team? I think that selling is equally important as the external selling towards the customers.
Definitely. Jonathan, I'd love for you to wrap us on this last talking point.
Yeah, very good points. Very good points on both. We always say here, like, you know, Demostack, we're aiming to replace the demo environment. And I always say to the team here, like, the entire organization demos. A demo is not like a sales thing, you know, just a couple of sales reps to run. Everyone demos. Like we demo candidates. You know, people considering working with us. And, you know, and we love that because I feel like a demo is such an interesting perspective into an organization. You want to know what you're coming into and what you're selling and what you're supporting, or if you're CSM, you know, what kind of customer questions might have and you're going to serve. I think it's interesting for everyone to see a demo. I think a demo, when it's done right, when it's our tool in your arsenal, it can grease the wheels all over, from top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel. It's not this thing that you do a lot of research and then whip up this big, huge thing. It can really kind of accommodate every experience, everyone in the org. They can all tell a unified story. And if you have a good product, a great product, Jocko's point, a lot of people will be on the same page and will tell the same story and will tell from their different perspective. And that's actually, that introduces sincerity and authenticity, right? And helps because, you know, a finance person might not be as smoothly pitching as the best salesperson out there, but they'll tell us from their real perspective and how, what they feel and why they joined and how they're using it and you know, and stuff like that. So I really believe it's eventually a demo is rails to tell a story. If you can use it wisely, your product is essentially a canvas that you can paint on and support a really strong story and tell it to each point of your audience by different people in your org at every stage of the funnel. So it's a holistic thing. It's not a sales thing. It's not a marketing thing. It's an entire org thing is done well.
Yeah, that was amazing perspective. Thanks, Jonathan. I want to go ahead and move into the Q&A. We had a lot of awesome RSVP questions come in. So I'm just going to pepper these to each of you. So first up, Scott, what's the best way to determine the effectiveness of a product demo and its impact on closing?
Of course.
I think
That's a really great question. So in my opinion, you need to come up with a framework or like a template of like how you're going to score demos. You know, it starts with knowing what you're looking for. There's actually a company I advise for called Replays that is really cool. They have this like master checklist of what you should actually do on demos. There's like a 30 point checklist, and then you can actually score your team against that based on what you as a company have decided makes for a good, you know, sales conversation. So they're really cool, and they basically have a team of like VPs of sales who you can actually send your demo to, and they'll give you feedback from their like team of experts. So super cool stuff. I would check them out. I think they have a bunch of free resources and stuff if you're looking to really upgrade your demos from like a really tactical standpoint. But you need a rubric to coach against. Then you can give a score, and then you can see how if your scores align with closed won deals.
Awesome. That was a great recommendation. Jonathan, how can you avoid lengthy pilots and trial requests altogether after presenting a demo?
Good, actually, a really good question. I think about that a lot. Like I used to tell part of our, you know, my passion to starting some of the Demostack was I always felt like, you know, trials is where deals go to die. That's because, you know, what happened, it's like this big gap between a prospect is interested, right? They talk to you, they had 1, 2 talks, 3 maybe, and they're like, okay, we want a trial, but usually, you know, they're not ready to buy, obviously, else they would buy and talk about that. So there's some gap there that's still substantial to get to contract. But they do want to kick the tires, give it a whirl, really, you know, put in their hands. And then what happens usually is there's a lot in a trial, there's a lot of setup, there's a lot of how, you know, so you first get a product, it's empty. When it's empty, you need to do a lot of work and connect the different tools, start getting it going, start getting users. There's a lot of momentum that you're starting from zero. And it's very hard to do because if the prospect is not committed enough to buy, then the commitment to get over any hump, even the simplest product, even like, you know, Slack, which is a product I set up myself when we just started, right? The first thing I set up, you still have to go through the motion and get it up and install it and invite the people and create email. And that's an issue. And that's why I think where a lot of trials fail. I would argue that, you know, again, it's something that we support, but I think there's like a middle ground. What if you can send a demo version of a trial? Remember, at least when I was young, there were like demo games that you get on discs and or down from the early internet, where you get like one level of a game, right? So you play that game, you get a good feel of the game, but then you walk through the door to get to the second level and you're like, okay, this was a demo, you want it, go pay. So if you can give a demo where you don't need to learn everything, you don't need to get it, you have something that feels like a trial, that's like a sandbox, that people can just see the how, because it doesn't need to necessarily work. They want to get a feeling of what it will mean to use it. If you give something that's personalized where they can just go in, play with it, and feel the what instead of the how, and you can skip the how part, I think that will make trials way, way more effective. Thinking about that as that kind of the one level thing versus like, here's the product. Well, you know, we can't help you that much, you know, and putting that's a too wide of a gap. And that's why deals kind of lose momentum and then eventually just don't happen.
That's very fair. Last RSVP question I'm going to ask Jaco, sorry. How do you balance discovery for a tailored demo with the prospect's desire for a demo as quickly as possible?
I'll keep this short. You ask the customer, what do you want to see? Like, there's no like, you know, pre-planned beautiful presentation you should go in with. You start the call with, here's the objective we have for the call. Does that still hold? Has anything changed? What do you want to see today? And then if you have the right tech stack in place, you're able to kind of like improvise in the moment without having to, force the customer through your 20-slide presentation. So ask the customer. I always tell my team that, ideally, a good discussion looks a lot like the conversation you're having with your friend in a cafe or in a bar. If your friend pulls up their phone mid-sentence, you're doing something wrong, right? So metaphorically, how to avoid that with a customer.
Isn't it funny how that works? That business is a lot like life. But that being said, we are almost at time. But before we head close out for today, I want to ask our panelists their tweet length takeaway. So keep it short and sweet. If attendees learned anything today, and for people watching in the future, if you want them to take anything away from this conversation, what would it be? What do we say? 280 characters or less, give or take. So with that, let's start with Jaakko. What's your tweet length takeaway?
Know yourself and know the customer. I'll cut the 250 words to 4 or 5.
I love that.
Know yourself as a presenter, know what your strengths are, know what your story is, make sure the whole company knows the story and it's the same, and then know what the customer needs and wants. If you're presenting to a VC versus a CFO, they need different things. And then everything beyond that is a good conversation with the best of breed tools.
Definitely. Scott, what's yours?
That there isn't a stronger connection between two humans than storytelling. So become a master storyteller. If you're a founder or an executive, enable your entire organization to tell your cohesive story. And then lastly, go check out Andy Raskin's framework for presenting it. It's a good jumping off point.
Awesome. We'll make sure to include a link to that in the follow-up. So don't worry if you didn't catch that link in the chat. Jonathan, last but certainly not least.
I would say the product is your strongest pitch, and it's a big pillar in storytelling. And demos don't need to be something that you need to work around. It can actually be an enabler. It can be a 10xer to your story. So tools have changed, and with the right tools, you can 10x any story you have. So start with story, amplify it with product.
Perfect. I love that. So with that, we're going to wrap things up today. But first, we want to thank everyone for attending. We loved having you here. Thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Demostack. They're doing great things. Be sure to check them out. Thank you also to our incredible speakers, Jonathan, Jaakko, and Scott. We appreciate your time and for the amazing content you provided. The recordings and key takeaways will be available on our site shortly. And don't forget to check out our upcoming events. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.